some of you are putting your questions in the Q&A box. Keep them coming. We'll come to them shortly. So I'd like to ask, what are the examples of best practices and frameworks for AI governance and oversight? And how, how can firms emulate that, I guess? So Tim, I'd like to come to you first. If you could sort of like outline what you think are best practices and frameworks for governance and oversight. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Cheryl touched on some of these things, and I'm going to say I'm absolutely biased on this one because I actually think the framework we've rolled out at CGI is phenomenal, right? So we've built out our own AI framework that we use not just internally in terms of how we're applying it to our own business, but we also use it with clients when they're asking us to develop our solutions to them. So the framework that we've gone about, implementing, it does touch upon a lot of those areas that we're talking about. This isn't I think that the first key takeaway is it shouldn't be a standalone framework. It needs to be baked in to some of the existing processes and controls that you've got in place. So if I look at a normal insurer, you've got a risk committee. Yeah. So some of the risks that we talked about today should actually be discussed from an AI perspective on that risk committee. Right. So I think the most effective way to get best practice, I would say, is make use of what's there today. Don't try and create a completely new structure and framework in order to try and manage and govern the entire topic of AI. Instead, make use of the existing controls. At CGI, our AI framework is an extension of our responsible use of technology framework that actually, we've got rules around what technologies we want to implement, what would we use, why wouldn't we use them, and certainly, in order to, because at the day, it's just a tool, right? You can use it for good and bad. So AI has a phenomenal ability to accelerate what you can do. And so you do need to make sure you've got the right checks and balances. As part of my introduction, my background is, I was previously an enterprise architect. And within the enterprise architecture, governance and frameworks, you look at new projects that are coming in and you do a security review and you do a risk review. So under that, change framework that most organizations have, quite mature, well-established IT change frameworks, I would again make sure there's the appropriate AI questions around those design authorities, the technical design authorities, the business approvals that happen when you're signing off on the finance approval on the go ahead of a project. Has it gone through an AI governance check? Are we comfortable that this is a use case that we want to explore? So some of ensuring that you're using the existing frameworks and governance, I think, is a really great way to ensure there's effective management and frameworks and oversight of AI within the wider business. Okay. And then there's specific areas that actually do need their own areas of focus. So for anybody who is looking to develop out their own models, right? So you're feeding data in and you're using that to develop a model. Data governance is so important to avoid some of the issues that we talked about around unfair decision making and effectively the wrong outcome, right? So if that is an area of focus, you actually then need to ensure, do I have the right data governance? Because otherwise, rubbish in, rubbish out, right? What you're using to train the AI models does make a difference. So ensuring you've got the right data governance on top of that is extremely important. And you could actually say that poor data going into it is a key risk that you have if you're building out models. Now, in practice, if we look at how people are using AI today, you're not building out your own models. Very unusual. I'm finding that clients are going off and doing a complete soup to nuts model from the ground up. Instead, they're building on top of somebody else's model. So back around in terms of risk management and governance, you are effectively engaging a supplier to provide you with an AI model, whether it's OpenAI, whether it's Mistral, whether it's some other technology, something unique. So ensuring you've got your right due diligence and governance around procurement of those AI models, right? Is there a copyright issue with whoever's providing that model to you? Have they trained that on data that they actually legitimately have the authority to train it on. So when you're looking at the ways to roll out these frameworks, it does actually touch a large number of existing control frameworks that insurers have today within their businesses. So it's like a wide-scale update. As an industry, we went through Solvency II and then GDPR, and all of the data governance and data oversight sort of focus that those regulatory changes brought actually did mature the wider industry around things like how to respond to subject requests, how to ensure that you've got correct data lineage over how you're reporting your financial reports. There's all these existing frameworks and controls that actually can, I think, can actually be augmented with a AI additional set of questions to ensure the right control is in place. I think I've answered the question. So back to what does best practice look like? It's making sure that it's actionable. So it's great to have all of these decisions. You've got to make it actionable. You've also got to have clear accountability. At CGI, we have a technical design authority for any solution we're building out, whether that's something ourselves or for a client. But we review that, and there are some key decisions that we ask ourselves, and there's clear accountability over who needs to ensure that that question's been asked to make sure we're happy that it aligns to the values of our organization in terms of what we're building out and what we're delivering. That's just one example of how to ensure you're delivering the right thing. It's less about the technology and more about the process you follow, the people who are making the decisions, and then how you're putting that into place. And again, it's aligning that back to the business outcome that you're looking to deliver.
Thank you, Tim. Najia, can I ask you if for any additional comments on further to Tim's very comprehensive answer?
Sure. Yes, I think so. Being a regulatory and compliance person, I think it's important to draw out the regulatory frameworks that exist, which will drive the industry's response, and the types of guardrails that are established. So I would say the EU's AI Act can be seen as the leading regulatory standard and the most comprehensive standard, and it will become mandatory for many insurers here in due course. The Act is likely to be passed later this year, with member states then having 2 years to enact it into their national law. And what it does is that it takes a tiered risk-based approach to implementing AI guardrails. So you have to classify. What's really important is that you have to do a risk assessment of your AI systems. You have to classify them, according to 3 levels of risk, and then you apply controls around those systems as prescribed in the Act. But there are different levels of control for different levels of risk, which is, in my opinion, a good approach. The EU is always comprehensive and prescriptive in its requirements, so I'm sure there will be a lot of work to do for companies that are adopting AI. From an industry perspective, some of you may be aware of the recent voluntary code of conduct for the development, implementation, and use of AI in claims, which was issued recently as a result of a cross-industry collaboration. It's worth taking a look at. There are several other guidance papers issued by insurance and actuarial bodies. You can look at the AI and Big Data, which was issued by the Canadian Insurance Institute, and the Australian guidance on the issues in AI, including that of bias, it's a 2022 guidance paper. At FTI, we incorporate this patchwork of regulatory requirements and standards across the industry and across the globe in our overall framework, similar to CGI, I suppose, for assessing the risk of failure in AI. So by failure, we mean the production of unintended or inappropriate outcomes from an AI system, including bias, for example. And we do this across 3 pillars of any AI system: data, including its sources, its quality, how it's sampled and stratified. Number 2, the model itself, which will include transparency and explainability of the model. And 3, the infrastructure supporting the model, which includes cybersecurity and data privacy, all the things that we have drawn out throughout this discussion. More specifically, we also have a comprehensive bias assessment methodology, and framework. And it uses, industry accepted statistical techniques to conduct impact testing and consider the distribution of a protected class in a sample. For example, loan applicants, mortgage applicants, resume submissions, etc., to see if that is materially different from the distribution in the underlying population. And what's interesting about this is that we work with several of the largest law firms in order to be able to actually test data containing protected characteristics on behalf of insurers who may not want to hold this kind of sensitive data themselves for testing purposes. And all the outcomes and the findings that we issue are issued under legal privilege. So it helps you to identify the bias, but without the legal liability that you might face in terms of regulatory scrutiny and so on. So those are some of the more industry-wide and more specific to FTI frameworks that do exist and are being used to support.
I might just add to that, Helen, because Najia just reminded me of something that's, I think, really important when looking at AI and the implication of it once it's running in production. Control over how it's running and developing in production. It's great to have these frameworks. It's great to do these assessments and absolutely do these, establish guardrails, make sure that you've got that within your organization. You should be thinking about how that fits in your organization. You should be bringing in relevant experts who can advise on how to do this the right way. There's a technology angle to that as well. As once these systems are live and running, you can't just let them run off in the wild. They've got to have control and governance. There's got to have ongoing review on them. It's equally as important to get all the testing before you go live, but once it's live, let's make sure you don't have that model drift that Peter was talking about earlier. So that ongoing review and guardrails and control over how some of these systems are working, because you don't want to have unintended outcomes for your customers because it's just gone a bit rogue.
Yeah, no, that's very, very good point. Thank you. Well, excellent discussion. Before we come to the questions, can we launch our second poll, please, for our audience? I'll encourage you to respond to this poll. Give us an idea of how you found this session. So if I kind of ask the audience to complete that, and then perhaps whilst the audience is doing that, maybe we'll turn to the questions. So I'll let you put your hand up to ask or to say whether you want to answer. So the first question has come in about data quality and inaccuracy. So would the panel consider data quality or inaccuracy as a substantial risk associated with their AI? The particular audience member said that they're currently investigating using large language models similar to legal profession for contract analysis, and the level of quality is quite often lacking. How is this going to be dealt with in order to deliver improvements and better reliability? Peter, I saw you had your hand up there.
I think it's a very good question. I would like to say we have mentioned in passing this concept of trustworthy AI models, and there's a lot that's been written about that. I've been a lifelong insurance modeler for 35 years. I think we don't give adequate time to the issue of culture. And modelers have this phrase called disproportionate outcomes, which is if you have like 1% data problems, you'll end up with 5% of your quotes being underpriced, but that'll result in 25% of your new business, which is half of your profit problem. In other words, when you have a little bit of a data problem, it gets amplified, as Tim said, in some of the downstream business activities. I think in terms of AI, this disproportionate outcome, the rule of disproportionate outcomes, is proportional itself to the complexity of the models, which means that AI models are going to be the models which are most prone to give you disproportionate outcomes because of this phenomenon. And on the one hand, the culture needs to incorporate innovation and experimentation. But I think because of this complexity in these models, we need to have an even greater dose of skepticism, right? The model looks good before we deploy it, but I think the practitioners would say the actual tools and techniques to verify that a model is market ready, an AI model is market ready, may not exist yet. They may not exist yet the way they do for statistical models. We'll find them eventually, I believe. So if you have that situation, the continuous monitoring that Tim talked about isn't something that is just a good practice that many companies should adopt. It has to be mandatory. It has to be absolutely day in and day out critical, so you can catch the situation where the train, which is going 1,000,000 miles an hour, is heading off the tracks. That's going to be critical for companies that successfully adopt and deploy AI, the agility to course correct, data issues notwithstanding.
Yeah, thank you. I'll come to Tim, as Tim has his hand up, and then I'll come to you, Cheryl, if that's okay. So, Tim?
I was just going to add to that. Yeah, totally agree, Peter, with what you said there. One of the things I know people, when they're looking at model development, they focus a lot on false positives. I would encourage people to also consider the false negative situation. So what's the outcome if the machine is gives you a false negative result? If I look across into the healthcare industry, a false negative result could be a life-changing event for somebody. So when you are developing up these models, doing that what if, how could it go wrong, ensuring you've got the right guardrails and continuous monitoring over it, considering not just the false positive situation, which most people will talk about and naturally want to test, the false negative side is also one of the areas I would say is worth highlighting. And I'll hand it over to Cheryl.
Yeah, I just to balance this a little bit, because I feel like we have very much underlined the importance of getting it right, having the right data in order to make the right decisions, and how risky it could be if you are not, starting with the right data. At the same time, AI can actually help you get good data, right? So you can use AI for data cleansing in order to bring in new sources of data that you didn't previously have. So think about it this way. If I don't have all of the facts to hand, then I'm not going to make a great decision. And so many companies are working with really siloed data, or not having access to data, or perhaps there's new sources of data that they previously have determined this would be really helpful if we could use it, but we just don't have anything in place in order to ingest it properly, right? So you can use AI for the things it's really good at, like it can take out the PII, the personally identifiable information, for you. It's really good at categorization above where humans are, because humans are very subjective. So it can categorize things, that can do all the labeling work, all of these really time-consuming efforts that make sometimes the valuable data unreachable for us. So you can make it a bit more reachable. And then, so that's the getting the data piece. You can also use it for synthetic data in order to help balance out. If you don't have access to enough representative data, you can also use synthetic AI to generate synthetic data to help balance out these structurally unfair data sources, basically, that we have right now. We might not have enough data on different groups, and so instead of today, we're already excluding groups because we aren't, without the use of AI, even because we don't have enough information on them, and in order to make the right decisions. But AI can help with that. That's all.
Thank you, Joel. Before we go on to the next question, can we have a look at the answer to the final poll, please, Tony? There we are.
Well, I'm pleased with the answer to the first question.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, so turning to the next question. So, earlier we talked about how AI models are high maintenance. Do we think that AI models will still be high maintenance as they improve? Or could better AI models replace the whole value chain rather than just parts of it? So, Cheryl?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I think I had the panel, the window open.
Yeah, I'm fine either. Or Tim, do you want to go first?
After you, Cheryl.
Okay, all right. Well, there really is a lot changing in terms of the capabilities of the large language models, not only in terms of how much data they're able to ingest and make sense of, but also now including the ability to remember things so that it can be better tuned along the right lines and give you better answers. So there will be some sort of improvements there, but I think that, you know, if I read the whole question, do you think that they will still be high maintenance, AI models will still be high maintenance as this improves? Remember that there are different types of AI, and again, AI is the umbrella term. So the more traditional types of AI, where we're going to go in, it's going to take longer to build it for you, or even for you to build it yourself, right? Those are still going to require maintenance. Now, maybe we will be able to help automate that maintenance, because AI can actually test AI and check AI's answers. So it might be a little bit more hands-off in terms of maintenance, or lower manual maintenance, but yeah, you still need to pay attention to the answers you're getting out either end, whether it's the more generative AI where you really need to pay attention, you need to stay part of that process, or whether it's something where you are looking at the analysis that was already made by an AI before implementing it with a more traditional AI.
Thank you. Tim?
So I'll add to that. I do think maintenance will get a little bit easier over time. I mean, that's what happens with technology. It gets more robust. Systems get built out. Ultimately, it does get simpler and easier. The second question, would better AI models replace the whole value chain rather than just parts of it? My personal opinion is no. It's not going to just replace the whole value chain. There is an absolute case for people in the loop. In fact, I like to use the term AI in the loop when I look at process improvements.
Yeah.
It's more about process optimization, how AI augments what people do. Take Microsoft, their AI is called Copilot. I love that brand because it describes what it is. It's a Copilot. It's not the driver. It's not taking over from you. It's just there to help you. So from my perspective, it's not going to replace the whole value chain. I do think we'll see changes, though. One of the things I'm fascinated about is the fact that you're going to have AI on the device, right? So there's AI chips now being embedded into your smartphone. So when we start talking about, the AI assistant from the Star Trek type future, I don't think we're a million miles away from that. We have Amazon Alexa that you can ask to, order you a copy of the next book that's come out, right? So again, I do think the way that people will interact with technology and use it in purchasing decisions and just their day-to-day life will change, but I don't think we're going to see a complete replacement of the value chain.
Thank you. That's good to know as well, from a personal perspective. I think a lot of people are worried about being replaced by AI. So turning to AI talent management, I'd be interested in the panel's thoughts on how you see AI talent management being implemented.
Well, I couldn't. One of the things that's been unique about this part of the evolution of the insurance industry is, I think it was Tim who said, the democratization of these technologies. And in the interest of time, I won't re-elaborate what Tim has already said so succinctly. But what I would say is I think there's a difference between the user community and the builder community. And we are advising some of our insurers on the skill sets that are needed for these new worlds. And I think there will be more and more people who use AI models or tweak AI models on a post-production basis. That's wonderful. And they need certain skills and technical understandings. Contrast to that, however, the people who actually in the builder community need a much higher degree of sophistication, at least at the present time, to avoid building models that are highly prone to insidious outcomes. And we're talking about, PhDs, and people have done a significant amount of theoretical work, and they are quite different from the skill sets of people who can use the democratizable end products in business use cases.
Thank you very much.
If I may just add to that, because we always we always forget that we have the people who are developing this, the people who are using this, but then there are also the people who are overseeing these systems. And there's definitely a need for, as you see now in the second line of defense and the third line of defense, we need to have cybersecurity experts. In the same way, or in the board, we need, boards need to be upskilled in cybersecurity. AI is the next thing. All these skills need to feed up into the oversight and governance mechanisms that we were talking about.
Thank you, Najia. Very important as well. So I want to say thank you very much to Tim, Cheryl, Peter and Najia for such an excellent session. The speakers' contact details will be circulated to all attendees. And I would just like to thank everyone for people's information. You can see the QR codes on the screen, and we will also send the speakers' details around to everyone. So everyone, thank you again for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.